And with one simple tweet, Ben Affleck has finally confirmed what Batman fans everywhere have been dying to know since the infamous sad Affleck meme came into existence. With constant reports of a cinematic universe collapsing inward on itself due to horrific amounts of studio interference and a desperate attempt at a course correction, fans were left questioning what laid ahead for the DCEU. Will he or won't he? Is he in or is he out? Is the Bat dead or is it alive? Well, finally, the powers at Warner Brothers have decreed that those of us who have sat in anticipation and morbid curiosity may finally be granted the privilege of peeking inside the box as Matt Reeves prepares to throw open the lid, and it turns out he's dead. But even before this funeral procession could conclude, the internet is already abound with theories of potential casting choices and storylines before we've even had time to bury the remains of the now opened box. Personally, I'd like to take a little more time to mourn this loss, because despite a horrible critical response to all 3 of the films he starred in as Batman, Ben Affleck has undoubtedly left a permanent mark on the character, for better or worse. It seems only right to honour that by taking a look back at his time wearing the cape and cowl and dive deep into examining all that went right, all that went wrong, and what exactly could have possibly led to this final exit. Can't really talk about the history of the mighty BatFleck without mentioning the tumultuous fan response Ben Affleck got when he was announced as the choice to play Batman in the then upcoming Batman v Superman project. And when I say tumultuous, boy do I not mean that in a good way. A large majority of people were incredibly vocal about how much they were not on board for this casting. Myself included, admittedly. Indeed, when I heard of the casting, first thing I did was jump right on my laptop and furiously type out an angry message to all my Facebook friends about how much I was not on board for this. From the responses I got to that message, along with others I read online, I could see that there were 2 huge factors contributing to people's anger. The first one was the fact that most people already had an idea of who they wanted to play the part, and the second was Daredevil. Now, the first point is fairly easy to address. Not living up to fans' expectations of who should play Batman is in no way Ben Affleck's fault. It's not his fault that the director, producers, and casting directors felt he was the best pick to portray this particular iteration of Batman. It's not his fault that those people don't read or pay attention to online fan castings. I mean, why would they? They don't need people on the internet with no experience in the industry they work in telling them how to do their jobs, nor are they obligated to listen. This didn't stop fans from reacting the way they did, though. The fact that Affleck wasn't on anyone's radar in regards to casting made it feel completely out of the blue, almost like it was done for shock value. Most fans already had such a clear image in their mind of who should play Batman that they inadvertently became attached to that image. A lot of people wanted them to just bring back Christian Bale, since Man of Steel had already gone out of its way to mimic the look and feel of a Chris Nolan film, to the point of actually just having him produce the movie. I personally really wanted to see Carl Urban take on the role. They were reportedly going for an older, more grizzled take on the Dark Knight, and he had just proven himself more than capable of pulling off the look when he starred in Dredd. Plus, he kind of looks like he's taken a few punches to the face, but is still somehow handsome, so that really worked to his advantage. With the winding down of Mad Men, the majority of fans everywhere were fairly adamant that Jon Hamm should play the role, and still are today, in fact. I mean, let's be honest, he is the perfect casting choice for an older Batman. I mean, my god, just look at him. I had a friend who really rather desperately wanted Richard Armitage to play the role, simply because, while The Hobbit was shit, he was hot as shit in it while brooding his way through all that CGI nonsense. The argument could be made, and in fact was made at the time, that fans shouldn't be so quick to judge just because they couldn't envision what Zack Snyder had in mind. After all, this was the kind of thing fans had said about Michael Keaton and Heath Ledger when they were cast in their roles respectively. While I look back on my response to the casting, I find myself agreeing with the idea of not judging before you actually see the very thing you're supposed to be judging. However, I still disagree with the last argument. Sure, fans were furious at the casting of Keaton and Ledger in their films before actually seeing them, only for them to be completely blown away by their near-perfect performances. When you look back at these initial responses, though, they were both triggered by the same thing: typecasting. Before playing Batman, Keaton was known solely as a comedic actor, and people just couldn't see him bring the necessary amount of grim to the role. Ledger was known solely for romantic comedies and being a pretty boy, so no one could picture him laughing like a maniac whilst murdering people. Also, there was a lot of shit about him being in Brokeback Mountain, because for some reason people think that him being paid to kiss another man on screen meant he was incapable of playing the Joker. But, I mean, come on. If there is one member of Batman's rogues gallery who wants to fuck Batman harder than Catwoman, it is the Joker.
I hate you, Joker.
I hate you too.
I hate you more.
I hate you the most.
I hate you forever.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. Anyway, Point is, people's concerns were rooted in the fact that we hadn't seen anything from these actors' past that indicated they could do this. This allowed them to break the mold that Hollywood and audiences had cast them in. Ben Affleck didn't really have that luxury. When we look back at Ben Affleck's career, he has been in countless different roles. From action to comedy to romance to drama, he at one point was dipping his toe in almost every genre like he was desperately trying to avoid typecasting. Unfortunately, this kinda meant that he ended up doing a lot of floating around as an actor, ending up everywhere all at once, but never seeming to belong anywhere. There was one role in particular that made comic book fans everywhere scream, "Have we learned nothing?" when his Batman casting was announced. A role I've already mentioned, the disastrous attempt at a Daredevil film was met with much chagrin by all, and comic book fans are never quick to forget when you blunder a beloved character. This was all the proof anyone needed to back up the claim that Affleck was not suited to be a superhero. This wasn't an actor attempting to break typecasting and prove himself as a performer so much as it felt like an actor begging for a second chance. The safety net that Ledger and Keaton had was no longer in place for Affleck. Throw in the fact that his casting gave a lot of people George Clooney flashbacks, and things didn't look too good for him. Fortunately, Ben Affleck was more than ready to make all the haters, including me, eat their words. I'm going to admit something here. While I understand that the BatFleck suit design is based on Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns version of the character, I don't like it. Specifically because it is that version. I have never liked the Frank Miller costume and character design. To me, Batman is supposed to be a ninja. It's all about stealth, speed, and agility. It's about taking out your opponents as quickly and efficiently as possible. And he can't exactly do that when he looks like a big fat gorilla monkeying about on the roof. And I think the fat logo looks ugly. But for many people, the reveal of the suit was all it took to get them excited to see Ben Affleck's take on Batman. Couple that with the trailer that revealed several key moments from the now infamous warehouse scene, and suddenly more and more people were on board for this. This was shaping up to be the Batman fans have always wanted. A Batman who could move effortlessly through a room of 20 guys, taking them out with a combination of expert martial arts and combat gadgets that most other versions of the character ultimately failed to deliver on. The Burton Schumacher Batman could barely move in their costumes, and so their fight scenes were incredibly restricted. Nolan had a lot of fun sequences, but the way he chose to film them made them feel disorientating and often lackluster. Not to mention, all the suit designs involved the actors wearing single-colored rubber body condoms, which thankfully the Affleck suit did away with completely. It looked like the suit from the comics, the iconic grey and black cloth mesh we always wanted in a Batman film. Then comes the release of the movie. Batman and Superman finally on the big screen together, and better yet, they were gonna beat the shit out of each other. I am not here to give my 2 cents on that movie. I've already done that in a different video. I'll provide a link. I'm here to squarely talk about Ben Affleck's Batman, and for all its fault, the film got him mostly right. The scene of him running into the cloud of dust and rubble during the Battle of Metropolis has become an iconic image that will now forever be associated with the character, as it perfectly summarizes all you need to know about who he is as a person. The kind of man who will run headfirst into a battle most would run from. The kind of man who will put everything on the line to do what needs to be done when people are in danger. It's by far the best use of the character in the DCEU, and perhaps the best use of him in any film. The recognizable iconography of the character is all there, including what are perhaps the best renditions of the Batmobile and Batwing we have ever seen in live action, and more focus on the actual detective work is always nice. Affleck brings a coldness and a quiet anger with his performance as Bruce Wayne, a subtle rage behind his eyes that can only be let out once he's put the suit on. In the past, other actors have always tended to lean more towards portraying the Batman alter ego as the performance he puts on. He only acts terrifying and menacing as part of his disguise. Ben Affleck's Batman just is terrifying and menacing, almost like he's becoming his true self when he dons the caped cowl, which is why he seems to regard the suit with such fear and anguish. He knows that putting it on is taking him to a place he's not sure he can come back from, nor is he sure he wants to come back. Simply taking off the mask doesn't suddenly revert him back to affable Bruce Wayne as it has with other on-screen versions. No, when BatFleck takes off the mask, all the rage is still there. He is still Batman in those moments. He isn't cracking wise with Alfred so much as Alfred is cracking wise at him. He isn't sharing in the jokes. He's focused on the mission, which Alfred seems to be tirelessly trying to prevent him from going too far over the edge on. The real performance for BatFleck is his public persona as Bruce Wayne, a performance that this version has done so much by this point that he seems almost bored and annoyed by it. Suddenly, he has to turn off that anger and turn on the playboy charm, and it amazes me the way Affleck flowed so effortlessly into this. Makes me wish I'd seen more of his false Bruce Wayne persona in action rather than just the snippets we got. The only other portrayal of Batman we've seen that does this so perfectly is Kevin Conroy's vocal performance in the animated series. He switches back and forth between the two distinct personalities like a second nature, whilst also never ceasing to make sure people understand that it's Bruce who is the disguise, not Batman.
Appreciate the help, Doc. I'll return the favor next time you're raising funds. Bye-bye.
This computer checked that fiber against every animal species known to man.
Christian Bale's performance comes close to this, but he plays the characters more like he has three separate personas. There's the real Bruce, who only his close friends get to see, Playboy Bruce, who's designed to be as cringe-inducing and unlikable as possible, and then there's Batman.
Where were the other drugs going?
I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
While there's nothing wrong with this, and it works in context of those films, it is perhaps why there always feels like there's some kind of disconnect between Bale's Bruce Wayne and his Batman. BatFleck avoids this disconnect as he blends Bruce Wayne and Batman seamlessly together in a way that feels natural and allows you to better understand his psyche in much the same way Conroy did. When you add on to this his cameo appearance in Suicide Squad, which regardless of what you think of it, again, see the video link for my thoughts, he is still good in that movie. And what we get is him truly making the character his own. The shots of him riding on the roof of the Joker's car and diving into the water with an oxygen mask to save Harley Quinn only add to his iconography rather than detract from it. Oh, how I wish I could have lived in that bubble forever. It would be very easy to blame the fall of BatFleck on Justice League. I actually don't have a link to that since I never made a video about it, but I hate it in its entirety up until Superman beats the shit out of Steppenwolf and then uses his freeze breath. Also, the moment where Superman looks at Flash while he's running is great, but other than those two moments, what am I doing? But unfortunately, the downward spiral didn't start there, so much as it culminated there, I think. Ben Affleck spent a lot of time orchestrating a career comeback for himself, and in doing so reinvented himself as one of Hollywood's best directors. The fact that he took on this role must have meant that he genuinely believed in Zack Snyder's vision for BVS, since there was no reason for him to do this film when he had his own projects to worry about. So when the reviews came pouring in, and they were less than positive to put it nicely, I really don't blame him for having PTSD flashbacks about all of the times something like this nearly sank his career. But hey, no harm, no foul. At least once these movies are released, we can all just move on and oh wait, no we can't, because he's supposed to be writing and directing one, right?
I'm going to direct the next Batman. We're working on it. It's what it's
The prospect of this was something fans everywhere were especially keen for, but it makes me wonder if Affleck ever wanted to actually do it. It seemed like everyone just assumed it was going to happen and he just went along with it because enough people had suggested it. Throw into the mix the release of Live by Night and you can pretty much see his gradual decline of interest in both the movie and the role. Looking back on the Live by Night press tour, Affleck clearly just wanted to talk about his new movie, but all anyone on the press tour wanted to discuss was Batman. It got so bad he even started making jokes about it in interviews.
one of those things that's really frustrating because, like, with Live by Night, it took me a year and a half to write it and get it ready, and I worked really hard, and it's just nobody gave a No one was like, where's Live by Night?
Right, yeah, right.
But with Batman, I keep on getting, they're like, where's the Batman? I'm like, bro, I'm working. Give me a second.
And if
Oh my God, it's such a pain in the ass. It's like every time I mention Batman, it gets this huge, clickbait. When I was doing this movie, it took me 2 years to get it together, but nobody ever asked me, where's Live by Night? They asked me, it's Batman, Batman, Batman.
Given the mixed reception for Live by Night and the seemingly complete lack of interest from the public, I think Affleck can be forgiven for feeling a little jaded about his role as Batman. Here he is fresh off a critical failure trying to remind people that, hey, I do other things, but all I want to talk about is, hey, you were Batman. Are you going to keep being Batman? Please make a Batman movie. I'm sure at some point during this time, it dawned on him that this would be all he was allowed to talk about or even do for however long he continued to play this character. If he in any way felt suffocated by that, I don't blame him in the slightest. He agreed to be pinned down to something without fully understanding the repercussions that would have on other aspects of his career. The fact that he bailed out on directing the Batman after Live by Night's poor performance isn't really that surprising when you look back on it. The silver lining was that at least we would get to see him in Justice League. Then the movie came out. Justice League is one of the worst on-screen portrayals of Batman I've ever seen. I mean, it's not as bad as George Clooney. At least Affleck has moments where it feels like he's trying. However, there are a lot more moments that feel completely phoned in. Gone is that rage behind the eyes, and instead replaced with this kind of docile stare and bizarre attempts at awkward and goofy humor. When criticism was thrown at the DCEU for being too grim, no one meant Batman. Batman is meant to be that way. But it only works if everyone else is the opposite of him. Warner Brothers, in an attempt to respond to this criticism, criticism, went way too far in the other direction and tried to make everyone lighthearted and fun, including Batman. That doesn't work. Batman doesn't make jokes, he doesn't say funny observations, at most he'll say a cool one line, but it's usually organically worked in to make him look badass, not to make him look funny.
Who are you working for?
Thank you. I couldn't have saved Lois without your help.
I'm aware of that.
From this height, fall wouldn't kill me.
I'm counting on it.
Yeah. Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
By doing this, they severely damage Ben Affleck's characterization of Bruce Wayne and Batman. He's no longer a brooding loner doing things for the greater good, afraid of his own dark side. Now he's just some awkward dad bumbling and stuttering his way through conversations with the other adults in the room.
I was wondering if you could put out a, the feeler, the aquatic, I mean, do you talk to fish?
Well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you like me.
I don't... not...
Where is his confidence? His self-assured attitude? You can clearly see Affleck struggling to figure out this material, lost in a sea of Zack Snyder's dark vision and Joss Whedon's bad one-liners. The fact that he didn't want to be Batman anymore after all this isn't really any more surprising than finding out he didn't want to direct it anymore for basically all the same reasons. And yet I'm still pretty sad about it. It's weird looking back at Ben Affleck's tenure as Batman and coming to the realization that he played arguably both the best and worst live-action versions of the character. Yet despite all that, I don't look at it and see all the flaws. I look at it and I see the endless amounts of wasted potential. Sure, his Batman killed, but there were ways to organically rectify that in story that would have given the character a compelling arc. Hell, the reason Tim Drake becomes Robin in the comics is because he wants to stop Batman from going too far after the death of Jason Todd turned him into a more brutal and aggressive crime fighter. BatFleck came from a lived-in world where the possibility to bring in characters from the comics for him to interact with was endless. Now they want to do a younger version again, and suddenly the odds of seeing Red Hood or Spoiler appearing in the films have gotten smaller and smaller. There are so many characters I could name that I would have loved to see Ben Affleck's good version of the character interact with. Now I never will, and that sucks. Ultimately though, Ben Affleck is doing what he thinks is best for him, both as an artist and for his mental health. I can't fault the man for that, nor should anyone else, and I hope he comes away from this realizing that the failings of this cinematic universe were not his fault.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Does that joke work here? Because it's Matt Damon in that scene, not him. So, anyway, sorry. It breaks my heart to see you go, Ben Affleck, but I will try to remember the good times rather than dwell on what could have been. So long, BatFleck. We hardly knew ye.
Well, before we do this, is there anything you want to say? Any official statement you would like to make?
I don't know. I guess, I'm not Batman?
Thank you for watching the show. If you enjoy, please let me know. You can like and share, subscribe if you dare, and please leave a comment below.